It was a bright afternoon at Arlington National Cemetery. The air was calm, filled with the quiet rustle of trees and the soft sound of footsteps from visitors. Sergeant David Hale stood at his post near the tomb of the unknown soldier. His uniform was spotless, his face calm and serious. Every move he made was practiced and perfect. To him, this duty was not just a job, it was an honor. He had promised to protect this place of respect and silence no matter what happened around him. That day began like any other. The sun shone over the marble stones and visitors watched the changing of the guard in respectful silence. David's focus never broke. His steps were measured, his gaze steady. He had done this duty hundreds of times, but every moment felt just as important as the first. For him, the tomb wasn't just a monument. It represented every soldier who never came home, every life that ended too soon in service. Then, something caught his eye. Just beyond the black iron fence near the road that led past the cemetery, a small figure moved. It was a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old. She was wearing a light blue dress and holding a small stuffed bear. Her hair was messy and her eyes looked lost, as if she had been walking for a long time. She didn't seem to be with anyone. Visitors usually came in groups, families, tourists, or veterans. But this girl was alone. David frowned slightly, still keeping his calm posture. He watched as she wandered closer to the edge of the road. His instincts told him something was off. Children didn't usually wander near that area alone. He looked around, hoping to see a parent nearby, but there was no one calling her name. She stopped near the fence and looked around, confused. Then a white van appeared from the road ahead. It moved slowly, almost too slowly. The sound of its tires on the gravel caught David's attention instantly. The van stopped near the girl. The driver leaned out of the window, saying something to her. David couldn't hear what was being said, but he saw the man wave his hand as if inviting her closer. The little girl hesitated and hugged her stuffed bear tighter. A chill ran down David's spine. He knew he wasn't supposed to leave his post. Tomb guards are trained to remain still and silent to protect the tomb's honor at all times. But this was different. A child could be in danger, and he couldn't ignore that. His heart pounded as he made a decision. Without thinking twice, he stepped away from the marble platform and began walking quickly toward the fence. The visitors nearby looked surprised. They had never seen a tomb guard leave his post during duty. Some thought something terrible must have happened. David's boots hit the pavement with a firm rhythm, and his eyes stayed locked on the van. He raised his voice, and calm but strong. "Hey, stop right there!" The man in the van turned his head sharply. His expression changed in an instant. He tried to smile and wave as if nothing was wrong. But David's instincts told him this was not just an ordinary situation. He moved closer, his hand lifted in a signal for the man to stay put. The girl stepped back, her small face filled with fear and confusion. The driver spoke quickly, his voice nervous. "It's okay, officer," he said. "She's my niece. She just wandered off. I'm taking her home." David didn't answer. He kept his distance but continued to observe carefully. The man's eyes darted from side to side, avoiding direct contact. The little girl shook her head slowly. That was enough for David. He knew something was wrong. He spoke into his radio, his voice steady but urgent. "This is Sergeant Hale. I have a situation near the north fence. Send military police immediately." Within seconds, another guard nearby responded, and 2 officers from the cemetery security began moving toward his location. David kept his position between the little girl and the van, his posture protective but calm. The driver noticed the approaching officers and began to look nervous. He placed his hand on the door as if ready to drive away. David's voice grew sharper. "Don't move that vehicle." His command was firm, trained, and full of authority. The driver froze. The tension was heavy in the air, but David remained collected. The officers arrived quickly and surrounded the van. They asked the man for identification. He fumbled with his wallet, dropping it once, and stammered as he spoke. The girl stood behind David, clutching her teddy bear, still shaking. One of the officers gently asked her name. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear, and the name she gave didn't match anything the man had said. Everything became clear in that moment. The driver's story was falling apart. David's gut feeling had been right all along. One officer placed a hand on the man's shoulder and asked him to step out of the van. David stayed beside the girl, his presence calm and comforting. She looked up at him with wide eyes, as if realizing for the first time that she was safe. Visitors who had been watching from a distance began whispering. They had come to see the tomb of the unknown soldier, but they were now witnessing something very different. A soldier protecting the living with the same dedication he showed to the fallen. When the van was searched, the officers found several strange items inside, things that didn't seem to belong to a family vehicle. David didn't ask what they were. He didn't need to. He was just thankful he had trusted his instincts. The girl's parents were soon found near the visitor center. They had been searching everywhere for her, panic written all over their faces. When they saw their daughter safe in David's care, they burst into tears of relief. The mother hugged the girl tightly, thanking David over and over again. He simply nodded, saying softly, "I'm just glad she's okay." As the officers led the van driver away, David returned to his post. His steps were steady once more, his face calm again. But something inside him had changed. That day had reminded him that duty isn't only about standing guard. It's about being ready to act when the world needs protection. The cemetery grew quiet again, the air still and respectful. David resumed his watch, the same precise rhythm in his steps. Yet now every sound, every moment felt different. He knew he had done something that would stay with him forever. And though the world might never fully know what had almost happened that day, one thing was clear. The tomb guard's promise to protect didn't stop at the edge of the marble. It extended to every life that came within his watchful sight. The van door slid open with a slow, uneasy sound. The little girl took a small step back, clutching her teddy bear tighter to her chest. Her eyes were wide with fear and her tiny hands trembled. The man inside the van tried to smile, but it looked forced, almost nervous. He spoke to her softly, trying to sound kind, but something about his tone felt wrong. It was the kind of voice that made you uneasy, even if the words sounded gentle. Sergeant David Hale stood tall just a few steps away from the fence. His voice rang out again, strong and clear. "Stay right where you are." His command carried authority, the kind that made people stop without thinking twice. The driver turned his head sharply, startled. For a second, their eyes met. David saw a flicker of guilt or panic in the man's eyes, something he had seen before in people trying to hide the truth. The visitors nearby had also noticed what was happening. A few gasped quietly. Some pulled out their phones but were unsure if they should record. They all knew the tomb guard's duty was sacred. It was rare, almost unheard of, for a guard to leave his post. So whatever was happening must be serious. The driver finally stepped out of the van. He was wearing jeans and a wrinkled shirt, a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He spoke in a shaky voice, trying to explain himself. "It's okay, officer. She's my niece. She just wandered away. I came to get her." But David didn't move. His training had taught him to look past words and watch behavior instead. The man's hands kept shifting, one in his pocket, then out again. His eyes darted between David and the little girl. And when David asked her softly, "Do you know this man?" she shook her head. That simple gesture changed everything. David spoke into his radio quickly, his tone firm. "Code red. Child possibly in danger. Send officers to Northgate immediately." His voice remained calm, but his body was tense, ready to act if the man tried anything. The man laughed nervously, holding up his hands. "You've got it all wrong. I'm just trying to help her. Look, she's scared, as maybe she's confused." David didn't answer. He took another step forward, positioning himself between the girl and the van. The girl's breathing was uneven. She looked from David to the man, unsure what to do. David gave her a small nod, a silent promise that she was safe now. Within minutes, 2 cemetery police officers arrived in a small security vehicle. They jumped out and approached carefully. "What's going on here?" one of them asked. David explained in short, clear words. "This man claims the girl is his niece. She says she doesn't know him." He stopped his van near her and tried to talk her inside. The officer turned to the man. "Sir, may we see your ID?" The man sighed, pretending to be calm. "Of course," he said, pulling out a worn wallet. He handed over a driver's license. While one officer checked it, the other asked the girl her name and where her parents were. Her answer didn't match anything on the man's ID. That's when the truth began to unravel. The officers asked the man again how he knew the girl. His story changed slightly. First he said she was his niece, then he said he had seen her wandering and wanted to help. David noticed sweat forming on his forehead. He had seen that look before. Someone caught in a lie but still trying to act innocent. One officer quietly spoke into his radio. running the man's information through the system. The other officer gently guided the girl a few steps away and gave her a bottle of water. She looked exhausted, as if she hadn't eaten or slept well. David knelt beside her, his voice soft. "You're safe now. We'll help you find your family, okay?" She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. The atmosphere grew more tense by the minute. Visitors had stepped farther back, whispering to one another. A few children clung to their parents. The usually peaceful air of the cemetery felt heavier now, filled with worry and disbelief. The officer who had checked the man's ID walked back to David and gave a slight nod. "There's a problem," he whispered. "This man's record isn't clean. He's under investigation in another state." David's jaw tightened. His instincts had been right all along. He turned to the man and said firmly, "Sir, please step away from the vehicle." The man's calm mask cracked. "You can't do this. I didn't do anything wrong," he shouted. His voice echoed across the quiet grounds. "Step away from the vehicle," the officer repeated, this time more forcefully. The man hesitated for a moment, then tried to move toward the van door. Maybe to drive off, maybe to grab something inside. But David reacted faster than anyone expected. In 2 swift steps, he blocked the man's path. His tone was sharp, unshakable. "Don't move." The man stopped, his shoulders slumping. The officers moved in quickly and restrained him. The situation was now under control. The crowd let out a collective sigh of relief. One of the officers opened the van door wider to check inside. There were blankets, snack wrappers, and a few odd items that didn't seem right for a family vehicle. Nothing directly harmful, but enough to make everyone uneasy. They photographed everything for evidence. David stayed near the girl the entire time. She had calmed down a bit and was quietly humming to herself, holding her teddy bear close. "You did the right thing," David told her gently. "You were very brave." After a few minutes, the girl's parents arrived, running toward the scene. They had been searching frantically for her and were in tears when they saw her safe. Her mother fell to her knees, hugging her daughter tightly. The father shook David's hand again and again, struggling to find words. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "Thank you for saving her." David gave a small smile. "I'm glad she's okay. That's all that matters." As the officers escorted the man away, David looked at the van one last time. He couldn't stop thinking how close things had come to something terrible. He returned to his post slowly, his heart still pounding but his face calm once again. The visitors watched in silence as he resumed his guard. His steps were steady, his movements precise, just as before. But there was something different in the air now. People looked at him not just as a guard of a monument, but as a protector of life. That moment, quiet and powerful, stayed with everyone who saw it. A tomb guard's duty was to protect the memory of the fallen. But that day, David Hale had protected the living and reminded everyone that courage doesn't always wait for battle. It appears when the world needs it most. The police investigation began immediately after the man was taken away. The quiet peace of Arlington National Cemetery slowly returned, but the air still carried the weight of what had just happened. The little girl, whose name was Emily, sat with her parents near the visitor center. She was still holding her teddy bear tightly, but her eyes looked calmer now. Every few minutes, she looked toward the area where Sergeant David Hale stood, as if she somehow understood that he was the reason she was safe. The officers soon discovered shocking details. The man in the van was not who he had claimed to be. His name was listed in police reports from nearby states. He had been wanted for questioning in several child disappearance cases. He had changed his car's plates and moved from place to place, trying to avoid getting caught. The officers realized that David's sharp observation had saved not only Emily, but possibly other children too. When David was told about the findings, he stayed quiet for a moment. He looked out across the cemetery grounds where rows of white headstones stretched endlessly. "I just did what I thought was right," he said softly. "I didn't think about anything else." But everyone around him knew that what he had done was more than right. It was heroic. The next day, news of the event spread quickly. Visitors who had witnessed the rescue told others about it. Someone had recorded a short video of the moment when David shouted at the van, and it began to circulate online. People everywhere were amazed to see a tomb guard, known for his silent, precise duty, step out of line to save a child. The story was shared on the news, and soon David's name became known far beyond the cemetery gates. Reporters came to Arlington, hoping to speak with him. But David didn't want attention. He wasn't used to cameras or microphones. He preferred silence and discipline. When one reporter asked how it felt to be called a hero, he simply said, "I'm a soldier. My job is to protect, whether it's the tomb or a child." The Army released a short statement praising his quick action and judgment. They said his bravery reflected the true spirit of the service, always ready to act in defense of others. The commander of the unit personally met with David and shook his hand. "You honored your duty in a way that goes beyond tradition," the commander said. "You showed that courage means protecting life, not just guarding it." Emily and her family wanted to thank him again in person. A few weeks later, they returned to the cemetery. David was on duty that day, walking his post as usual, each step perfectly measured. When he saw them waiting quietly nearby, he gave a small nod to his fellow guard and stepped aside for a brief moment. Emily ran up to him, smiling shyly. She held out a small drawing. It was a picture of a soldier standing next to a little girl and a teddy bear. Above it, she had written in her neat handwriting, "Thank you for being my hero." David knelt down to take the drawing. "That's beautiful," he said gently. "You're very brave, you know that?" Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "We'll never forget what you did," she said. "You didn't just save our daughter. You saved our whole family." David smiled kindly but modestly. "I'm just glad she's safe," he replied. "That's all that matters to me." He gave Emily a soft salute and she giggled and tried to copy it, raising her tiny hand to her forehead. From that day on, David kept the drawing safely in his locker. It reminded him of the reason he had joined the military, to protect people, to stand for something greater than himself. Each time he saw that simple drawing, it gave him quiet strength. Over the following months, letters began arriving from people across the country. Some were from parents thanking him for protecting someone else's child. Others were from veterans who said his actions reminded them of the true meaning of duty. Even children sent drawings and small notes saying how brave he was. David read every letter carefully, humbled by the kindness of strangers. But for him, the real reward was knowing that a little girl could sleep safely at night. He never wanted fame or awards. When asked later why he had risked breaking the sacred stillness of the tomb, he gave a thoughtful answer. Silence is powerful, but sometimes doing the right thing means breaking it. A few months later, there was a quiet ceremony held in his honor. The Army gave him a special recognition for his bravery and quick thinking. The commander spoke briefly, saying, "Courage isn't always shown on the battlefield. Sometimes it's shown in a single moment of choice, a moment when one person decides to act even when no one expects it." David stood tall, his uniform shining in the sunlight. He didn't speak much during the ceremony. He just looked out toward the rows of graves, thinking about all the soldiers who had given their lives to protect others. He knew he was only following the example they had set. When the ceremony ended, David returned once again to his post. The marble stones glowed softly in the afternoon light, and the world around him was peaceful. He began his slow, measured walk, just as he always did. 21 steps, pause, 21 seconds, turn, 1 steps again. Visitors watched him with quiet respect, but those who knew the story saw something deeper in every step. They saw not just a soldier guarding a tomb, but a man who had shown the same bravery and dedication in protecting the living. That evening, as the sun began to set and the sky turned golden, David paused for a brief moment and looked toward the horizon. The soft wind carried the sound of leaves rustling through the trees. He thought of Emily and her family, safe somewhere far away, and felt a calm satisfaction in his heart. Duty, he realized, was not only about standing watch. It was about seeing, feeling, and acting when something wasn't right. It was about courage, compassion, and doing what needed to be done, even when no one expected it.